Nina Dobrunova has been fighting for Ukraine by supporting heroes on the front line. She's been heavily involved in fundraising for frontline supplies and also on the side fighting Vatniks with the NAFO meme warriors. But I'm going to get Nina to introduce herself. She's been very active with a number of groups, and we're going to dive into the details of that in our conversation today. Nina, welcome to the channel, and over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a proud Ukrainian, and I consider myself just an ordinary citizen of Ukraine. And the unfortunate reality of war in my country engaged me in volunteering work. So now I'm helping Ukraine defenders to helping with supplies, with logistics, and there's also a big part of moral support that I'm trying to provide to make contribution to our future victory. And yeah, that's basically it.
And when did this start? Was it immediately upon the full-scale invasion, or have you been involved in these activities prior to this? Because, of course, I mean, for those who follow Ukraine's story a bit more closely, the invasion did not start in February last year. Russia's been seeking to influence Ukrainian politics for many decades, but invaded Crimea in 2014. So when did your activism begin?
Yeah, so my activism began after the full-scale invasion. Previously, I was like most of Ukrainians, supporting other volunteers, donating to my friends who ran their volunteering activities since 2014. We were also, like many people from my circle, were involved in making common nets and tent candles and all kind of things before full-scale invasion. But I was very passive, I would say. It was only donating money or spreading the word about their activities and stuff like that. But then when the full invasion started, and I was in Kharkiv, and the first tanks that entered Ukraine were actually entering my home, my house, 30 kilometers from Russian border. And it was a huge shock. It changed the life of my family dramatically, and we had to flee from Kharkiv. And it was really difficult experience in time. And for a few months, I couldn't really do anything apart of trying to survive and to settle life on a new place. But then after several months, I was realizing that I'm actually in a very privileged position because I have a job. I didn't lose my job. I could work from any point remotely. And I was in a safe place. The city where I'm now, there was never any shellings. Luckily, we have air alerts regularly, but there was never any shellings, so consider it's quite safe. And again, a lot of friends who were really actively volunteered, they also motivated me that I can actually start doing something else, more than just donating, more than just sharing posts, but maybe give some of my energy also to support defenders and to bring our victory closer. So after, I think, 2 or 3 months of the full-scale invasion, I started to look for ways to apply my skills, because I work in digital agency. I have like management skills. I can organize processes and stuff like that. So, and the war is also, it's a lot about logistics, about making decisions, about organizing different parties together. And yeah, so that's where I started. And now I'm really, I think it's full-time job also for me now, in addition to my main job. But that's something that yeah, I made a promise to myself. I will not stop it till the end of the war, and it also brings me a lot of personal benefits. I learn a lot. I meet a lot of new people. It's like there are a lot of positive things happening in life during this. So, yeah.
That's an extraordinary aspect of it. And, you know, even though I'm at a great distance, there's been a sort of similar effect in that you suddenly start having things in common with people who you perhaps never would have met in normal life. And of course, your circle of contacts grows massively. It needs to, because you have certain aims in mind, certain objectives. And I discovered you on Twitter. And I've been following your posts with great interest for a number of months now. Obviously, if you're a digital agency, if you you know, you're one of these sort of digital natives, so-called, it must help a lot in being able to turn platforms like Twitter and so on to be able to turn them into some kind of benefit for what you want to achieve.
Yeah, it helped me a lot. First of all, I have a lot of colleagues from different countries, so I like familiar with different cultures and have an idea about different like rules of communication, and that helped me a lot to approach people, especially people from other countries. And actually, when I started my volunteering activities, I was specifically looking for international volunteers, like people who arrived to fight, who arrived to help with supplies here. So I reached out to many people. I collected a lot of information that I would never get if I didn't have the skill to reach out to people and to speak English. Also, I also speak French a bit, so I connected with French-speaking communities as well. So that gave me a lot of information and a lot of confidence also to continue. And then Twitter community, of course, as well. For Twitter, for and about NAFO, that is a big topic as well. If you want, we can switch to this as well, because
yes,
that's another big part of this adventure of my volunteering story. So that I think NAFO is some like really extraordinary phenomenon, because I don't believe it happened before, that such a huge community of people from around the world just connected and started like making things that that NAFO makes. And I'm also proud member of NAFO, and I believe you too, Jonathan, right?
I am. Yes, I got my avatar in, I think it was June last year, so almost or July last year, so quite early on when everything was only a few months into the war. No, it's an extraordinary phenomenon, isn't it? I never know quite how much awareness there is in Ukraine of it, and how much it helps morale. But yeah, and I definitely wanted to dig into that, and you know what the main benefits of NAFO are. I mean, is it more important as a fundraising vehicle, or is it more important to, you know, raise morale and show people that there's a big global community supporting Ukraine? I don't know how, do you feel it has lots of different purposes?
Yeah, there are a lot of different purposes. For me, I can just tell how I feel it, because I'm sure different people on different roles, they might feel different advantages of NAFO. For me, at first, I was never like active user of Twitter before physical invasion, and I had my account since a long time, but never used that much. And then I just started to look for some news and updates about the front, about the war, how the world see our war in Ukraine. And then I decided to come back to Twitter. And then I ran into the NAFO, some NAFO people posting a lot of funny memes. And for me, it was like really cool, biggest motivation. I liked those memes a lot. And I just followed many NAFO accounts only because of this, because they were posting really funny memes about Russia and about all the situation. It was also really helpful at the time when you like really scared. I read alerts, you expect to be bombed any minute and to die even. And then it was like really distracting from all this. So I liked that a lot. And then I dipped into it more, and I see it's really a community that supports Ukraine. So I decided I must join too. And I also got my NAFO avatar, and that was like really interesting experience because many people came to say hello, to congratulate with joining NAFO. So it was only this was already a huge benefit for me personally, because it helped to distract from the war and to feel some support, even though it's like online support, but still. And then I saw that it's not only about jokes, actually, this community. These people do really serious things, and the achievements are really impressive. And especially, I'm still impressed every time when I see some tweet from Russian government, for example, and then it's like million of memes and tweets only from NAFO community, and you literally cannot find any other comment into this. So, and then you really see that. So this is also a war, information war, and we have really strong, huge army that is on our side, and Ukrainian side, and the side of light, I would say, that is fighting with all this Russian propaganda, with all these lies. We also block many people who try to really push these Russian narratives. And without like such community, I don't believe it would have been possible. So this is, if you ask me, for me, this is the biggest achievement and the most important part for us, because Russia is a huge country and they have a lot of people, and just make all those people trolls, they will win this war, because the quantity is crucial in this war. And now the whole world kind of joined us in the face of NAFO, and we can fight this now. Still, there are a lot of problems, and not everything we can just solve quickly. They still manage to convince people in the West in their lies, but many things they just really erased with NAFO efforts. And then, of course, this whole idea about fundraisings, and really many people are so supportive. I would never believe that it is possible if I didn't see it with my eyes here. And then another part, which is actually my mission that I made for me, that people also learn about Ukraine, because I know definitely for sure that a lot of people from abroad, they didn't even know about Ukraine existence. And that was always shocking me. I was talking to my colleagues from what was that, Argentina or some really far away country. They never even heard about Ukraine. Maybe they learned it at school, but then they just forgot it, and it was fine. So I see that a lot of people are interested in this, and they really want to learn it, and I have now possibility to share this information with a huge audience, and that's also big, powerful like platform for spreading info about Ukraine, and that will help to rebuild Ukraine. I think it will help us to become like to share awareness about what's going on here. So this is also a huge help, and that's kind of.
I think it's not just, ordinary people. I mean, I studied Russian history and language, and I think it's many sort of academics and people also didn't really appreciate the differences and the distinctions. And actually, a lot of Russian propaganda narratives about brotherly nation and we're all the same and Ukrainian is a derivative of Russian. I mean, all this kind of nonsense did have an effect, and a very deep effect, and even through academia, I think. The very first person I met in Russia was in 1992. Well, I met the taxi driver, I met people at the airport, but the first person I had a proper conversation with was in a small, they had sort of double student rooms in Moscow State University, MGU, the huge Stalin building in the center of Moscow. And it turned out the person in the neighboring room, and we had to share a bathroom, was Ukrainian, not Russian. So the very first person I met in Russia and had a proper conversation and shared a beer with was Ukrainian. And he started trying to explain to me the differences. And this was in 1992, going back 30 years. But it's not until the full-scale war that I really understood what he was talking about. So, even if you're immersed in it, it's a Moscow-centric, Russian-centric narrative that has dominated. And as you say, NAFO is helping to reset that, and of course, strong Ukrainian voices. And what I find extraordinary is that so many of the people I've interviewed, so many of the people who are involved in volunteer efforts, NAFO and so on, are women. Why do you think it is that Ukraine has such extraordinary, strong sort of characters that are female, and so much of the sort of culture, identity, and civil society is also being driven by women?
That is actually interesting point that you're raising. I can say that in my digital agency where I work, we have almost all roles, leading roles are taken by women. And I'm also in a leadership role there. And I thought it's like a coincidence. Maybe it has nothing, we are not discriminating men or something. It's all really fair. And still we have also this problems that in some areas it's still difficult for women to start a career or to rise higher. But overall, I think we have quite a fair society, and it's women's rights are really not discriminated, and we can do whatever we want, and we have just strong people, and it's not only about women. To be honest, I cannot tell exactly if there is any particular reasons for women being more there or men more there. For the army, of course, that's the case. We have more men in fighters in the army, but that's I think normal. In other areas, I don't have first the statistics information to tell for sure, but from my feeling, it just sometimes it's just a coincidence. Sometimes there are really some particular reasons that women can do this, like easier for women to do it, or men just busy with some other stuff. But overall, yeah, I think the situation in Ukraine is quite different from other countries. Even, for example, Switzerland or France. I have a lot of colleagues and friends from these countries because I learned French, and I got in touch with many people from these countries. And what I see that there are most men in big companies, not that much diversity. And in Ukraine, I would say it's quite different.
It is fascinating, yeah, no, and there's so many cultural figures, so many civil society leaders, incredibly strong personalities. I mean, it's I'm sure people will write academic papers on it, but I just thought it was an interesting phenomenon. Another aspect of NAFO is, of course, that it challenges Russian propaganda narratives. It challenges the historical mythology, lies, etc., that are very much part of Russia projecting power around the world. And this is quite a sensitive question, but as a native of Kharkiv, as someone who I imagine would have had, first language being Russian, potentially Ukrainian second language, I mean, the Russian narrative says that they were coming to save your city, coming to save people like you. And some people in the media in the West even now fall into that trap of assuming that just because people are Russian speakers, just because the Donbass historically has been sort of, slightly higher in terms of Russian speaking, or Crimea or whatever, they assume that somehow Russia has a right to politically control these areas. These narratives, when you see them, must absolutely, enrage you, and must be a motivating factor fighting these awful lies in the activity you're doing.
Yeah, language is a very sensitive topic, and Russia uses this for their propaganda heavily. They have so historically it happened that we have a lot of Russian-speaking regions, and that was not a choice of those regions. It was really government of USSR who made it. And I can share my experience because I really I can tell how it really was from my perspective. I was born in a village near Kharkiv. It's very, very close to the city, just 10 minutes drive. But it's a huge difference in terms of how people speak. In my village, with my grandma, my mother, we all spoke Ukrainian. And it's just 10 minutes from Kharkiv. And when you go to Kharkiv, you no longer can speak Ukrainian. You must turn to Russian. That was always like this. Or you'll feel awkward, you'll feel embarrassed, and it's like on all levels. I was studying in Ukrainian school in my village, and then I moved to Kharkiv to study at university. And in university, we had only one professor who spoke Ukrainian, and it was like his really strong idea that all students will listen his lessons only in Ukrainian. It was also very difficult to switch because you have the whole day of Russian lessons and you write in Russian because alphabet is different, and then suddenly you need to switch to Ukrainian, and it was like a mess in your notebook because the brain cannot work like this. But he was really strict on it, and he at that point of time, I couldn't understand the point. I was just a student. We do what we were told to do. But now I do realize how weird it was. I go home and I speak Ukrainian with my grandmother because she was always living in the village. She was only out to the city for some shopping, and it didn't influence her so much. For me, it was different because I had to adjust to the city life and to the rules that are in the city. And you could not hear Ukrainian in Kharkiv. It's just everywhere it was like mandatory. And at university, I was, there was other students from villages, but we all had to switch to Russian when we joined our group because you physically feel like you are different or something is wrong with you if you speak Ukrainian, and that was historically made for all the people, and it was reality. That's something I felt in myself. I would never believe it if someone would tell it to me, but that was really something I would highlight.
That's a horrible irony, isn't it? Because one of the propaganda narratives is that people who are Russian speakers would feel uncomfortable in Kiev and Eastern Ukraine and so on, and they're, discriminated against. Everyone I've spoken to on the channel, and it's now many dozens of people, have explained to me, and this includes also locally here, refugees and other people who've traveled around whose native language is Russian. Not a single one of them has said they were ever discriminated against when they spoke Russian in a more Ukrainian environment. But here you say the reverse is actually true, that speaking Ukrainian is uncomfortable, was uncomfortable in some areas, because clearly, the state is imposing that requirement on, business, on administration, on education. That is, the absolute functioning of imperialism, isn't it? I mean, that is the absolute imperial intent behind doing that.
Yeah, I cannot confirm that anyone was discriminated, but what I can confirm that people really, especially people who were made to have Russian language as native, then they were forced to speak Ukrainian. For example, now we have this rule that all restaurants and all the shop assistant, all the public places, they have to speak Ukrainian. And that, of course, caused a lot of discussions, and also Russia likes this, that people feel bad that they were forced to do something they don't want. Even now in Kharkiv, when you see like older people, for them to switch to Ukrainian, it's not an easy task. And it's like a challenge they never wanted, and suddenly need to make this effort. They of course may feel bad about this, but it's not about discriminating something. It's just it's a difficult topic. We need to bring back our culture, but because this was so already broken, all this, it's really hard to make it smooth. It causes some troubles. But there is also a topic about west regions of Ukraine and east regions of Ukraine. We have a bit of different culture, and the language and dialects are really different. And there are also people who are far away from Russian border. They were not that influenced Russian language. They sometimes have also this idea that it was I even heard some really elderly people in the Carpathia saying that we were pro-Russian in Kharkiv because we spoke Ukrainian. So they also have this a bit of kind of blaming of us. It's not on a large scale, it's like individuals, but there is an idea that something is wrong with us because we speak Russian there, but it's nothing about discrimination. We're still still a bit different. There are different even cuisine, different type of vyshyvankas we wear, but still it's all Ukrainian culture. And the language, you can, I imagine that some Russian-speaking people can be kind of rejected in some really deep villages in West regions when they hear Russian language. But now it's also because of the war. Before it was never a problem. It's now a language of invaders. It's a language of the enemy, and we only use it to leverage it in the war. For example, I know that some of our soldiers, they could save their life because they could speak Russian, and they confused Russian soldiers because those thought that they're like at night, for example, they cannot really distinguish. And the language was really lifesaver. They cannot speak Ukrainian, so for them, it's not an advantage. So we use it now as an advantage against the enemy. But among Ukrainians now, it's a language that we should never speak, and that's only the Russian.
And I've heard, speaking to some volunteers, because I think we'll get on to the sort of last topic, which is fundraising for volunteers and your connection with that. But I've also heard that Russian and Ukrainian are very much interchangeable on the front. It's whatever in a particular situation makes communication easy, because when you're trying to survive, you need to communicate in a way that is most direct and easier for the particular individual. So I understand the situation on the front is a little bit different. I also heard that if you're using official military communication channels, then there is a rule that you can only do it in Ukrainian. But that, of course, is logical because it makes it far more difficult for, or even impossible in some instances, for the Russians to decode and understand military communications. So a very clever use of language, being flexible when you need to, but being stricter when, it's going to save lives and for security reasons.
Yeah, but people just got really emotional because of all the horror that is happening. So they just stop sometimes thinking about this like benefits. They just think that it's bad and we need to erase it, and we hate people who are not agree with this. And yeah, unfortunately, that's something that will haunt us, I think, for some time, and we'll need to work this out. And yes, we can see that was a strong point for Russia to really start invasions, like really nonsense, protecting people who speak Russian in Ukraine. I live in Chernivtsi, that is 30 kilometers from Romanian border, and villages in our oblast here, they speak Romanian. They don't know Ukrainian, they don't know Russian, they just speak Romanian. And the lady who rent an apartment from, she cannot speak with me like fluently. We just communicate with translation because I don't know Romanian language and she speaks Romanian. And that's normal, like whenever you live next to some other nation culture, it influences, and that was also historically probably different like country before. And no one says that someone is discriminating Romanian speaking people. They have Romanian language at school also, and I had it at school, Russian. We learned Russian 3 days per week. So we really we knew all rules of Russian language. It was never discriminated. Now it will be, because now we will, I don't believe there will be Russian lessons at schools after what happened. So
a matter of survival, isn't it? And I mean, one of many reasons, but one of the reasons why Belarus has been almost completely assimilated and controlled by Russia and is now really a puppet country. One of those reasons is that the Belarusian language was eroded far more than Ukrainian was. And language power, control, independence, I think people have a much better understanding of how these things are interlinked and how culture and language are used by Russia as an imperial weapon. Well, let's turn to, I think, a really fascinating topic, and this is one where you're most sort of active online, and that is raising money for volunteers. And I'll start with what is a difficult question, I think, and that is that almost everybody in Ukraine will have either a friend or a family member who's on the front. I assume that's the same for you as well. And this must be a very strong motivation in, raising money and doing the stuff that you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. Friends and family members on front, you want to give them everything and do whatever you can for them, and you worry about them. So that's the biggest motivation. For me, I had no one who I know on the front when the war started. It changes, of course, with time. Now I have quite a few relatives on the front and a lot of friends. Before it was kind of like distant from me. That's why I felt uncomfortable with it, because I don't know anyone. I don't know what is going on there, and I know that they need help for sure, and I don't just to know how to approach this another world, because really when you live in the deep rare, let's say, it's very easy to lose like feeling, and you can even ignore what is going on the front. But I was really concerned about this, so I started to look for new friends who are on the front now. There was a lot of colleagues who shared fundraisings for their relatives. I also joined those fundraising, but still it's like for me it was important to know someone personally so I can have my own conclusions of what is going on and to have some first-hand information. And yeah, now I have quite a lot of people who I know personally, who I met, who I'm communicating on a daily basis, and I know their needs, what are their pain points, and it also changes, so it's something to keep track on. What the needs that we had in the beginning of this full-scale invasion and the needs that we have now, they're different. It's not the same. For example, in the beginning of the war, there was like there was no tourniquets, no first aid kits even on the front. So now the situation with this part is better. It's like rarely you can meet such problems. There still exist in some units, but not that widely. But at the same time, now we have more needs with drones and the really expensive things that are living not long and deployed on the front line. So this is our focus now, not those basic things. And that's important to have someone really close who you can keep connected and see where to put your efforts better.
And it must be important to understand what is in deficit, what is required on the front, because there's obviously always a limited amount of funds, both Ukrainians internally within Ukraine generating money. You've got the Ukrainian diaspora now that is huge, of course, around the world, and a lot of Ukrainian, business people in the US and Middle East and Europe. And then, of course, you've got the international donations. But despite all of that, there is always a limit on funds. There's always a need for more money than is coming in. So how do you think it's possible to get this balance? Is it sort of Starlinks or drones or tourniquets, or I guess the need changes as the war changes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The need changes, and there is also seasonal needs that is important. In winter we have one priorities, in summer we have other priorities, and during the different phases of the war they also have different needs. And in Ukraine we have a lot of factories who start producing things that were previously difficult to get. We had to brought them from Europe or from US. So now it's getting easier. So it's not a problem with, for example, military uniform. Before it was, I think, 1 or 2 factories where you can only order it. And it was extremely difficult. I had to order from Europe, from US. It's a huge amount of money, huge amount of time and effort. Now it's like thousands of factories that provides it, and in a good quality. They also tried, failed, and then tried again. So we have now really good products for military we can buy within Ukraine, and it makes it much easier, and it also saves some funds and efforts. So this, for example, is no longer a problem, but still some other devices, for example, these drones, they can only be brought from China or from Europe, and that's something we cannot have within. So now this is most critical. Before we were just focusing on really basic things, to get clothes, to get shoes for soldiers. Now this problem is kind of solved, so we switch our focus to other things, and these electronic devices that they use on the front, like radios, night visions, and like all the things that is related to electronic. This is, of course, technologies that we have to bring from abroad, and that's difficult. And if
vehicles, isn't it? I was going to say vehicles is another one, isn't it? But this is where NAFO comes in to an extent, because a lot of the vehicles that are being transported over, the sort of SUVs, they're able to get people to and from the front. I mean, a lot of these are turning up with the sort of NAFO branding, and clearly the fundraising is having quite an impact.
This NAFO, but I haven't seen any yet. I heard there are some in Kiev. So yeah, if I would highlight number one need, it's frontline vehicles like SUVs and trucks and just full drive vehicle that can go to the front and back, and also for soldiers to bring some supplies, and like cars needed all the time. And that's why I think all volunteers, individual volunteers, big volunteering foundations, they all have a huge amount of budget specifically on bringing cars for the front. And the lifespan of those cars are not long, so they need to be resupplied, and it's like non-stop process. But the good thing that our government also made it a bit easier for us, because we don't need to pay tax for bringing car, because cars are utilized in Ukraine, but they're not produced in Ukraine, so they need to be brought from abroad. And normally we have a huge tax for buying a car in another country. But for military cars, now it's super easy and quite cheap to bring, and it makes volunteers' life and soldiers' life much easier, because we can provide. Basically, it's very easy to provide if you have $5,000. Then we have quite a lot of people who already trained to find these cars really quickly, bring to Ukraine and fix and just give to front immediately. So yeah, this is number one need. And then the number two need, I would say, are night visions, because they always needed. They also really easily broken and lost, and they also need to be resupplied. And the night missions, they are most efficient, from what I heard from my friend soldiers. So night missions are like the most dangerous, the most efficient, and night visions are needed either it is winter or summer, so always. And they're not provided in this amount to really supply to all soldiers. We have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. I don't believe any government of any country would have been able to provide enough. So it's very important that all volunteers also work for this and provide this to individual soldiers.
And it's a clear advantage over the Russians, isn't it? Because they may have more artillery pieces, well, not maybe now, but when the war started, they had a lot more artillery and so on, and the heavy weaponry. But night vision scopes give an extraordinary advantage, because the Russian soldiers won't have them. So they really can't fire with any accuracy at night. So that gives a huge advantage to Ukrainian troops. But also it's a massive way of preserving life as well, because if Ukraine can fight without incurring the losses that Russia is incurring, then that is a huge, huge advantage.
It could have been an advantage if Russia wouldn't have China next to them. And unfortunately, China is supplying them with a really huge amount of night vision, drones, and we have trophy night visions and drones that our soldiers get from Russians, and they, especially airborne forces of Russia, they really well equipped with this. Almost all soldiers have it. And that is specifically because they have good supplies of all this equipment from China. And unfortunately, we don't have that. So we use the same brands. We also buy Chinese drones, but we have to buy them through Europe or in some other ways. For Russia, they just, I think, supplied in huge amounts. So yeah, unfortunately, they have a bit of advantage with this now. That's also from the words of soldiers on the front. They also try to trophy all these things, and I also got requests sometimes to buy accessories, for example, batteries or some things from these trophy devices. They're a bit different from ours, but they're also really nice and can be used perfectly on the front.
That's a detail, yes, that I hadn't heard before, but it's yeah, it's deeply worrying that China, which is supposedly neutral, is anything but. The last area I want to focus on, and I really want to draw people's attention before the end of our conversation, we're going to put links into the description of this video of ideas of where people can donate, places which are very safe for them to give money to, which are going to go directly to benefit people on the front without middlemen sort of creaming that money off on bureaucracy and so on, which happens with a lot of Western charities, unfortunately. But there are, we have to be sort of transparent. There are people running scams. There are in every war, any country in history. It's a very fertile ground for scammers. How can people who want to donate money avoid falling into the trap of scams, or when they're approached by individual soldiers and they don't necessarily know whether it's a scam or not? What's a really good way for people to donate if they want to?
So I can tell my opinion on this. It's not maybe the most popular opinion, and but yeah, I only use this rule for myself. I have two big trusted organizations who I donated before and who I still trust, and they prove they are really trusted in Ukraine. And all my friends or all people who I know and who I love, they also we are really aligned on trust in this organization. That is Come Back Alive. This is organization foundation that provides support to armed forces and purchases equipment, and they really make a huge difference. And then Prytula Charity Foundation. This is, I think everyone knows Prytula. He's very charismatic. He's doing great fundraisers, and it's always fun, and you feel involved when you participate in this, and they're very transparent. So these two big volunteering charities I trust, and if I have feel I want to donate somewhere, I would go to these two. It doesn't mean that others are not trusted or something, but I personally don't have time to validate all those different big organizations. And these two, they just really 200% trusted. So we just choose this, and for others, I just cannot tell. And I just also have another idea about the volunteering. So one thing is volunteering to these big charities, and they do great things that I personally as one individual will never be able to do. But they're also solving different tasks than us individual volunteers. Those things that they buy, either cars or any equipment or supplies and the gear, it's in big amounts, it's very cool, expensive, needed things, but it goes to official armed forces, warehouses, to battalions, to authorities of battalions and armed forces. They distribute it on their mind, and it's, for example, I donate to Come Back Alive, so they buy drones. They buy 2,000 drones, but there's no way I can ask them that they give one of these drones to my friend on the front, and they will distribute it in some way that they believe is the best. But particularly my relative or the person who's close to my heart will not receive it for sure, because it doesn't work this way. It's a huge organization. They have reporting, they have all this bureaucracy that is necessary to keep track on things. And what we do as individual volunteers, we really supply things to some particular people who we really see they need it, and it's an urgent need, and they need it now to save maybe life of this person. And that is something that big organization will never be able to do, because they have to follow the rules, they have to have all these documentations, and for a soldier to receive something from battalion, he needs to go through the company. First battalion need to approve it, then company authorities have to approve it, and platoon commander needs to make all these documents, and then the soldier also needs to make some efforts to receive all these things, to get like things he needs. And unfortunately, there is no faster process for this, and sometimes it just doesn't make any sense to do it. It's better to go and buy, or to go to your relative and just ask, please find this to me immediately, because I just don't have time for this. And it doesn't mean that it's something that they should not do, this big organizations also needed, and for other areas, for example, when new recruits arrive, for them everything is given really quickly, and the best equipment that is available on the battalion, so they receive it, and then they go to join their squad, their platoon, and they can use it. But then when they are already deployed and they're involved, then all these bureaucracy procedures started, and unfortunately we don't have yet possibility to change it. So this like our tasks in individual volunteers to really support this urgent need for some specific people. We have a lot of soldiers, but we also have a lot of volunteers who help. A lot of them have relatives who also involved. So basically, we we solve different tasks, but we really work on the same goal, this big volunteering foundation and our individual volunteers. And then coming to the scammers and frauds, that's a big topic. I witnessed I think 3 or 4 big really major scammers to be revealed on Twitter during this year. So it's we should always be cautious of this. And yeah, I think there is no like recipe how to avoid it, just to be cautious and only trust to people who you either know personally, or you have like really strong reasons to trust to someone. From my perspective, I never even retweet or share posts of other volunteers who come to me and ask for this if I don't know this person, because I cannot validate it easily. It's not easy to identify sometimes if the scammer or fraud is really like trained. He or she can just do it really professionally, and to figure out if it's fraud or not, you need to put a lot of efforts, time, which I personally don't have. So I'd rather say, sorry, I cannot, because I cannot validate your identity. Or if I know the person who, like, we were in touch, we were talking, doing some things together, then I can trust this person, and that's where I can join in fundraisings and sharing, spreading the word about initiative. So, and from my perspective, I also understand that many people also could question my identity and if I'm a scammer or not. So I prefer to always offer something in return, because I don't believe any scammer would do this to really share something with people. And it's not only because just say thank you. From my idea is that when people receive something from Ukraine, for example, I'm sending letters, postcards that our Ukr makes them really like patriotic and beautiful, and I also help people order patches, which also turned out into a huge like phenomenon when a lot of people got really like collectible items, and we just so it's made in Ukraine. I share some piece of Ukraine with people. They feel they have something physical from what from the country that they really help, and it also makes them to understand our culture better, to be closer, and and then I think it also helps to build the kind of reputation, you can say, around Ukraine.
I think that's an incredible piece of advice there, and I think it embodies also the NAFO spirit, which is very, inventive, very personal, where you actually get to know the individuals. They may have sort of dog avatars, but actually you're really connecting with people, and they'll often, as you say, share details about themselves and why they're doing this, and that's brilliant that you're doing that as well, and really getting people to experience it and feel like they're not just supporting a war, but they're supporting the survival of an identity, a culture, a country, made up of individuals. I think this is hugely beneficial. I hope people are going to watch this to the end. I hope they'll click through the links and feel that it's both useful and safe for them to donate. We'll put those links in the description of the video. And I really hope we'll catch up in the future, and we'll share, your news, campaigns that you're running with the channel through the community pages. But I wanted to say thank you so much, Nina, especially for spending so much time on a Sunday morning to talk to us and share your insights with the audience.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's my pleasure. It's really nice.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!